With that look, you won't sell anything, he said, like passing sentence. His colleagues stayed silent, but their eyes carried the same mix of pity and superiority. A second of quiet stretched thin as wire, ready to snap. She didn't argue. Her thumb pressed the latch on the worn leather folder, click, and she turned for the door. A scream of brakes ripped the street. Glass walls shuddered. Everyone rushed to the window. In the middle of the intersection below, a crumpled sedan hissed steam. Beside it stood a man in a dark coat, unhurt, holding her folder. "Is this yours?" His voice, somehow audible through the cracked pane, cut through the room. No one understood how the folder had left her hand. Neither did she. But the man lifted it higher, as if presenting evidence. Down in the lobby, security flashed past. She ran. The revolving door spat her onto the sidewalk and into sirens, scorched rubber, a swarm of phones filming. The man in the coat watched her approach like he'd been waiting weeks, not seconds. He offered the folder with steady fingers. "You dropped this," he said. Calm. Too calm. "I didn't," she answered before she could stop herself. "Not here," he said, eyes flicking to the cameras. "Inside." Inside meant the cafe next door. He slipped through first, ordered nothing, chose a corner seat where the glare from the street turned him into a silhouette. She sat opposite, folder tight to her ribs. The snap had been real, she'd felt it. "So how?" He leaned in. "You came here to ask for a sales role. They dismissed you on sight. You walked out, holding this, ready to give up." "I wasn't giving up." "Good," he said. "Then answer this, if your prototype failed today, would you build another tomorrow?" She blinked. "You don't know what's in the folder." "I know enough." He slid a business card across. No logo. Only a first name, Milan, and a number. On the back, a single line, "Learn to be underestimated." "I don't need rescuing," she said, pulse still pounding. "Not offering it." He nodded toward the window. The three men from the interview stood on the curb, peering in, whispering. "Offering urgency. You have 48 hours. After that, the window closes." "For what?" "To make them wrong in a way they can't ignore." He stood, already leaving. "By the way, you should check the second pocket," he added, tapping the folder's spine with two knuckles. "You missed something." Then he was gone, swallowed by the crowd, as if he'd planned his exit, and even the steam from the crushed car obeyed his timing. Her hands shook. She opened the folder. Pages of sketches, unit costs, a raw go-to-market plan, hers. In the side pocket, a flash drive she didn't own. On its label, a date 2 years old and a word she hadn't written, origin. The door chimed. One of the interviewers stepped into the cafe, smoothing his tie. "Listen," he said, switching to a voice meant to sound generous, "we can consider you for an entry-level support role. No commission. 6 months trial. If you improve your presentation, maybe." She closed the folder. "No." He blinked, surprised at the speed of it. "No? Not to that." He tried a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Be realistic." On the table, the flash drive glinted like a dare. She slid it into her pocket. "I am." Outside, sirens faded. Inside, the espresso machine roared. The interviewer hovered, unsure whether to be offended or curious. "What's on that?" he asked, nodding at the folder he'd just mocked. "A story," she said, standing. "Yours ends in 6 months." The smile cracked. "I see. Good luck." She stepped past him into the brightness, heartbeat steadying, Milan's card burning her palm. 48 hours. A stranger who knew too much. A device labeled origin that shouldn't exist. And a sentence that would follow her like a shadow, with that look, "You won't sell anything," already shifting in her mind into a blueprint. She didn't know yet if the blueprint was a bridge or a trap. She only knew one thing: something had started, and for once, she wasn't asking permission to continue. She stared at the man in the dark coat, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. The wind caught his words and threw them back into the room like a challenge. Nobody moved. Someone behind her muttered something about calling security, but she was already pushing through the stunned crowd toward the glass doors. The air outside hit her like a slap, cold, sharp, brimming with the scent of burnt rubber from the accident. The mangled car sat crooked in the middle of the street, its front bumper kissing the curb. The man stood beside it, holding her folder as if it were something fragile, almost sacred. "How did you," she started, but he pressed the folder into her hands before she could finish. His grip was warm, steady, as though he wanted to pass something more than paper. "You dropped it," he said simply, though she knew she hadn't. She'd had it in her hands in the conference room. She'd felt the weight of it when she left. Before she could ask another question, he turned, melted into the growing circle of onlookers, and disappeared down the side street. She looked around, half expecting someone to explain, but the strangers only stared at the wreckage, their breath clouding in the air. Clutching the folder, she stepped back onto the pavement, her mind flickering through possibilities she couldn't quite piece together. She had nowhere particular to go now, her interview was over, the verdict final, but her legs carried her quickly away from that building. At the first quiet corner, she stopped under the awning of a closed cafe and opened the folder. Everything seemed the same: resume, references, the product sketches she'd worked on for months, but there, between 2 pages, was something new, a folded sheet of heavy cream paper with no name, only a sentence written in thick black ink. "If you believe they're right about you, they've already won." Her pulse quickened. She looked up, scanning the empty street, wondering if the man in the coat was still somewhere watching. The city around her felt suddenly different, like a chessboard where she didn't yet know the rules, but had just been given her first unexpected move. She closed the folder, tucked it under her arm, and kept walking. She unlocked the door. Milan stepped inside without hesitation, the dark coat dripping rain onto the warped wooden floor. Up close, he didn't look like someone who belonged to either side of the city, the sharp, glass and steel corporate towers or the cracked sidewalks of her neighborhood. His eyes were steady, but there was a faint tension in the way he scanned the room, like he'd been trained to find exits. "You read it," he said, glancing at the flash drive in her hand. It wasn't a question. "It's mine," she said. "Or it started as mine." "It's yours," he corrected, pulling out a chair at the table. "The version you should have had by now." She stayed standing. "Why give it to me?" He leaned back slightly, the chair creaking. "Because they won't see you coming. That's your advantage." "They? You mean?" He nodded toward the direction of her earlier humiliation. "Them. And a few more like them. The kind who measure your value before you've even spoken." Her pulse was quickening again. "You want me to, what? Launch it? Sell it? Steal their market?" "I want you to finish what you started, only faster. Before they realize you're not still licking your wounds." She crossed her arms. "And you're just, what? A good Samaritan with industrial espionage on a USB stick?" For the first time, he smiled. It was small and unreadable. "Let's just say I like investing in underestimated people. Sometimes the return is financial. Sometimes it's other things." She didn't like the sound of other things, but she couldn't deny the pull of the blueprint. It was like staring at a locked door you'd been trying to force open for months, only to find someone had left the key in the lock. "What's in it for you?" she asked. 48 hours from now," he said, "you'll either have something worth showing me, or you won't. If you do, I'll make sure the right people see it. If you don't," he shrugged. You'll go back to interviews where they tell you what your face is worth. He stood, sliding a folded card across the table. This one wasn't blank. It had a date, a time, and an address in the industrial district, far from her part of the city. Think of it as your deadline, he said, already moving toward the door. And if I don't show? She called after him. He stopped at the threshold, looked back once. Then we've never met. The door shut behind him with a final click. She sat at the table, staring at the address. The building it named was one she knew only from whispers, an abandoned warehouse that once belonged to a tech firm swallowed in a hostile takeover. If half the rumors about it were true, walking in there might be worse than failing. But her eyes kept drifting to the flash drive. 48 hours. And a version of her idea that could rewrite everything, if she didn't let it destroy her first. Sleep didn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the blueprint, its clean lines, its precision, as if it were alive, waiting for her to act. By dawn, she had cleared the kitchen table, pushed her old laptop to the side, and spread out every scrap of research she had ever made. Her own sketches looked clumsy next to the printouts from the flash drive. But there was something else in them, something the perfected version lacked. Her notes were messy, her prototypes flawed, yet they carried a thread of intent, a piece of herself no one else could have replicated. By mid-morning, she was working with a focus she hadn't felt in months. The hours blurred. Coffee went cold. Rain turned to sunlight and back again. At some point she realized her hands were trembling, not from exhaustion, but from the sheer possibility that this could actually work. Around noon, her phone lit up with a number she didn't recognize. Against her better judgment, she answered. "You're ahead of schedule," Milan's voice said, smooth as if he'd been watching. "You're keeping tabs on me?" "Not exactly. But the people you're about to challenge, they track everything. If you start making moves, they'll notice sooner than you think." "I'm not afraid of them." "You should be," he said. "Fear keeps you from underestimating your opponent." She almost hung up, but his next words froze her. "They've seen your work before. Someone in that building today has already tried to bury it once." Her throat tightened. "How do you know?" "Because I was in the room when they decided it." The line went dead before she could answer. She stared at the silent phone, her mind racing back through every pitch meeting, every rejection, trying to pinpoint who it could have been. The afternoon vanished into a haze of rapid drafting and late runs to the supply store. By nightfall, her living room looked like a war room, sketches taped to walls, parts ordered and laid out, calculations scrawled across whiteboard she hadn't touched in years. But as midnight crept closer, unease settled in. If Milan was right, she wasn't just racing the clock, she was building under surveillance. Every keystroke, every purchase could be flagged. She moved the project to an old offline laptop, disconnected from the world. It was slow, outdated, but it felt safer, like working in the dark where no one could see her hands. Outside, a car idled too long under her window. She froze, the pen still in her hand. The low hum of the engine seeped into the apartment, steady and patient, as if whoever sat inside wasn't in any hurry. She inched toward the curtain, pulling it back just enough to catch a glimpse. A black sedan. Windows tinted too dark to see through. She let the fabric fall back into place and turned off the desk lamp, plunging the room into shadows. The hum remained, a presence she couldn't shake. Minutes stretched. Then, without warning, the sedan rolled away, disappearing into the maze of side streets. Her chest loosened, but not enough. She worked until exhaustion forced her to rest, though sleep came in fragments. Every sound in the hallway seemed amplified, every creak in the building a question she couldn't answer. By morning, her eyes burned, but the prototype was taking shape. Not the full product, not yet, but enough to prove what she had claimed all along, that it could work, that it could be better than anything her former interviewers had on the market. She left the apartment just after sunrise, carrying only a small bag with the essentials and the prototype wrapped in a nondescript cloth. If Milan was telling the truth about being watched, she wasn't going to risk finishing this in her own home. Her destination was an old co-working loft on the far side of the city, a place that smelled faintly of sawdust and solder, where no one asked questions as long as you paid cash. She took the long route, changing buses twice, slipping into the crowd at every stop. By the time she arrived, the city was fully awake. Inside the loft, light filtered through dusty windows onto scattered workbenches. She set up in the corner, tools spread in a disciplined pattern, and began the final assembly. Hours passed. Sweat collected along her hairline. Her hands moved with precision, though every so often she glanced toward the door, half expecting someone to walk in uninvited. At 4:17 p.m., her phone buzzed with a single text from an unknown number. "They're on to you. Tonight." No name, no context. She packed everything in less than 2 minutes, shoving tools and parts into the bag. When she stepped outside, the street felt too quiet, the air thick with the kind of stillness that happens before a storm, or a strike. Somewhere between the loft and the bus stop, she spotted the same black sedan parked at the far end of the block. This time, the driver's side window was down. And the man inside was smiling at her. The smile wasn't friendly. It was slow, deliberate, the kind that told you the other person already knew more than you wanted them to. She tightened her grip on the bag and kept walking, forcing her pace to stay even. The sedan's engine rumbled to life. It didn't lurch forward, just rolled along the curb at her speed. She turned the first corner without looking back. The car followed. Another corner. Same hum behind her. Her mind ran through options: run, hide, blend into a crowd. The street ahead was empty, no crowd, no witnesses. She cut right into an alley that split between two old brick buildings, narrow enough that the sedan couldn't follow. Her footsteps echoed. Halfway through, a shadow peeled off the wall ahead. A man in a slate-gray jacket stepped into her path. "Long way from home," he said, his voice low but carrying. She stopped just short of him. "Do I know you?" "You don't," he said. "But the people I work for do. They'd like to make you an offer." His eyes flicked to the bag on her shoulder. "One that would make it unnecessary for you to meet Milan again." Her pulse jumped. "Not interested." He smiled without humor. "You haven't even heard it yet." "I've heard enough," she said, stepping sideways to pass. He shifted with her, blocking the way. "Think carefully. That file you're working with, it's stolen property. Right now, it's only a matter of who decides to press charges first. Milan's not the savior you think he is. He's got his own game, and you're just a piece on the board." The words scraped against her resolve, but she held his gaze. "If I'm a piece, I'll decide where I move." Something in his expression changed, an edge of respect, maybe. He stepped back just enough for her to pass. 48 hours, he said. "That's how long it'll take before your name is on every internal watch list they've got. After that, it won't matter how good your product is. You won't get near a buyer." She walked past him, not looking back until she was at the alley's far end. The sedan was gone. By the time she reached the main street, her phone buzzed again, this time from Milan. "Change of plans. Meet me in 1 hour. Different location. No address. Just coordinates." And when she plugged them into her phone, the map pointed to the edge of the river docks, where streetlights didn't always work, and the water was deep. The docks smelled of rust and salt, the air heavy with the metallic tang of the river. She arrived 10 minutes early, the bag slung over her shoulder, her breath clouding in the dim light. The coordinates led her to a derelict warehouse whose doors hung slightly ajar. One yellow bulb flickered above the entrance, casting a weak pool of light on the cracked pavement. She hesitated, scanning the shadows for movement. Nothing. Inside, the cavernous space was nearly empty, just a scattering of crates and the groan of wind through broken windows. Her footsteps echoed too loudly. "You're early," Milan's voice called from somewhere deeper in the dark. She turned toward the sound. He stepped into the faint light, his coat buttoned high, his expression unreadable. "I had company," she said. "A man in a gray jacket. Said you're using me." Milan's eyes narrowed, but his tone stayed calm. "And you believe him?" "I believe everyone has an angle. Including you." He smiled faintly at that. "Good. That means you'll survive longer than most." He motioned toward a crate. "Show me what you've built." She hesitated, then unwrapped the prototype. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional, a proof that her idea could live outside of sketches and theory. The moment she set it down, Milan crouched to examine it, his fingers tracing the lines like he'd been expecting every detail. "It's better than I hoped," he said. "Which is why they'll try harder to bury you." "Who exactly are they?" she pressed. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he straightened and walked to one of the crates, flipping the lid open. Inside were files, stacks of them, each labeled with names, dates, and company logos she recognized from headlines. "They're the ones who decide what reaches the market," he said. "If your work threatens their control, it disappears. If you threaten it, you disappear." She swallowed hard. "And you want me to fight them?" "I want you to win," he said simply. "But winning means burning bridges you haven't even crossed yet." Before she could reply, a noise outside cut through the stillness, tires crunching gravel, doors slamming, the sharp click of footsteps approaching fast. Milan's head snapped toward the entrance. "We've been found." A beam of light knifed through the doorway, sweeping across the walls until it landed on them. The flashlight's beam froze on her face. A voice barked, "Hands where we can see them." Instinct tightened her grip on the bag, but Milan stepped forward, shielding her partially from the glare. "You're early," he called back into the dark. Two figures stepped inside, one of them the man in the gray jacket from the alley. His eyes flicked to the prototype on the crate, then to her. "Guess you made your choice." She forced her hands to stay steady. "I haven't made any choice yet." "That's the problem," he said, advancing. "Choices get made for you when you wait too long." Milan moved subtly to the side, his position drawing their focus for just a heartbeat. It was enough. She slid the prototype back into the bag, zipping it shut. The movement was small, but the gray jacket man noticed. "She's leaving with it," he said to his partner. "No," Milan countered, his voice low but certain. "She's leaving because she's the only one who can finish it. You kill her or take her in, you'll never see it work." The man's partner shifted uneasily, eyes darting between them. "Orders were to retrieve the file." "Orders change," Milan cut in. The standoff stretched. Her pulse was a drum in her ears. Somewhere outside, a car engine revved, loud, close. Then, without warning, the warehouse lights blazed to life, flooding the space. The sudden brightness revealed more figures at the far end, half a dozen, maybe more, closing in fast. She couldn't tell whose side they were on. Milan's voice was at her ear now, urgent but controlled. "Go. Out the side door. Don't stop until you're at the bridge." She glanced once at him, saw something in his expression she hadn't before, something between calculation and trust. The gray jacket man stepped toward her, but she was already moving, weaving between crates, the bag tight against her side. Shouts erupted behind her. Footsteps followed. The side door was half rusted, but it gave under her weight. Cold night air hit her like a wave. She ran, the gravel slipping under her shoes, the river's black water glinting ahead. Somewhere behind, Milan's voice rose above the chaos, sharp, commanding, then was swallowed by the noise. She didn't look back. At the bridge, breathless and shaking, she stopped just long enough to glance at the bag. Inside was the prototype, her idea, her work, her gamble. Still hers. For now. The city lights shimmered on the water below, and for the first time since this began, she realized she had no idea if she was running toward victory or straight into another trap. Only that she couldn't stop now.